Welcome to SOapbox, the official podcast from Spencer Ogden. In this series, titled Voices of the Energy Transition, we explore the major forces reshaping the global energy industry. Each quarter, we'll tackle one key theme across talent, ESG, financing, and innovation. Hosted by our team members in Australia, New York, London, Malaysia, and beyond, SOapbox delivers regional insights and expert perspectives to help you stay ahead in the energy transition.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Soapbox. The agenda of our conversation today is a global wrap-up around talent and energy transition. Ella, John, and myself have been lucky enough to speak to 3 different guests across the last few months with the agenda of talent and the energy transition. So today we're going to wrap up what we've been speaking about over that time. I'll kick off with Ella, an introduction to yourself, your role within Spencer Ogden, and your key takeaway from your podcast.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ella. I'm based out of our Denver office and a manager for our power and renewables divisions across North America. I've been with Spencer Ogden for the last 5 years out of both London and Denver. And during my podcast episode, I had the chance to meet with the senior HR manager over at Cypress Creek. We spoke about skills gap between 3 to 5 years and how that's still difficult to hire for, even in a market is a little bit less competitive than it has been in the renewable space for the last 5 years.
Thank you. And John, if you could do an introduction.
Absolutely, gladly. John Bougias of Spencer Ogden's Australian/Asia Pacific business. I sit in Melbourne. I'm a senior principal looking after all of our clients in the permanent recruitment function, predominantly in sustainability. In terms of the topic we discussed with Merinda, Manjeet, and Adam Gifford, we had a really interesting panel conversation around the talent shortages and the key issues that all of them are facing from all 3 perspectives, being EPC, HR, and engineering respectively. Very interesting conversation and came out with different insights to what I thought. So looking forward to getting into that.
Thank you, John. Just a quick introduction to myself. I'm Scarlett Menzies and I look after our 360 contract division across EMEA within Spencer Ogden, focusing on hydrogen, decarbonisation and data centres. I was lucky enough to meet with Andy Baker from Turner Townsend, who is the Director of Energy Transition. My key takeaway was that delivering the energy transition at scale isn't just about the technology we need. It's about the people we're bringing in to do that. How do we build the right teams? How do we foster the values while we're growing at scale from Spencer Ogden all the way through to the end user?
Amazing. Okay. I'm happy to kick off our first questions. We have each explored different regions. We're all parts of different corners of the world, hence meaning I'm here at 7 a.m., John's here at 11 p.m. and Scarlett's managed to have this.
I got lucky with the lunchtime slot.
I'm a night owl, so it's okay.
I would love to say I'm a morning person, but happy to be here. My main question to kick us off, do we have any common talent challenges, or what were our common themes around our podcast? What would we say? Maybe we can go around and say what are the common talent challenges that are showing up in each of our regions.
John, I'll let you kick off and then I'll follow.
Honestly, I thought it was going to be very specific to skill sets in terms of which discipline of engineering they were going to end up talking about. I had a predefined idea that they were going to go heavily into grid and power systems, being that's our busiest desk in Australia, and the most difficult skill set to hire for. But what I did find, and what was interesting across all 3, and particularly with Adam being engineering and Manjeet being the head of construction at Envision, it was very much trying to find people with constructability experience rather than one particular discipline. People in different disciplines who had an idea of what was going on at the site could communicate that and then be useful in their particular function. And that was really insightful for me. I would say that that was the biggest challenge, and then applying how do we acquire those staff for their 3 respective businesses. It was similar challenges that they were all facing and troubleshooting those solutions. But perhaps Scarlett found something similar. I'm interested to see the Turner and Townsend approach to team building as well, and the insights that you would have been given from that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. One of my key takeaways was Andy spoke a lot around the different culture and values that Turner and Townsend look for when they're hiring, but also when people are brought in as a contractor or on a permanent basis. With what is the biggest challenge for them at the moment, I think the biggest thing is keeping up with the pace and the scale. of how quickly the projects are moving, how quickly the investments are going at the moment in Europe, and being able to find the right people for that. Because as a business, and I suppose a lot of businesses as well, they would love to be able to transition people from their oil and gas business or their nuclear business into the data center space. But the end users aren't accepting people that don't have at least 4 or 5 years data center experience.
Yeah.
That challenge of how do we bring people new into the market and get them trained up when we need them now? We don't have 3 or 4 years to wait. Is it that we focus more on the mindsets of these individuals rather than the background and how quickly can they get involved? I'd say that was becoming very clear to me that that's a big struggle. I see that with other clients as well, not just with Turner and Townsend, is that sector experiences with oil and gas. In the past, it was very easy to transfer that into wind, but we're seeing that difference in the kind of more critical environment projects.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I've worked in recruitment for the last 10 years now, and I feel like we've always had those conversations, regardless of what the market has looked like. It's always been, I need somebody with 10 years experience in this. There's not that many people who have 10 years experience in whatever they've been looking to find them in, regardless of whether the market dips up or down. There is always that pool of people that is going to be in high demand. For the US market, it was developers 2 years. You couldn't hire a developer and then the market prices changed dramatically. But again, they were looking for directors with 10 years experience, and then you had all these people join with 3 to 4 year experience.
Especially for Spencer Ogden, we're always trying to be one step ahead and move into those emerging markets, right? So we're trying to be ahead of that, but there's always sometimes candidates in the market behind us isn't keeping up with that as well. So I don't think it's something that we'll ever get away from, Ella.
How do we think the companies we're working with, or at least the companies we spoke with on the podcast, are addressing those talent shortages and skills gap? How are they getting ahead of that curve?
To answer your question, Ella, from an engineering perspective, we definitely have a very high shortage for the kind of projects we're looking to deliver, whether it be renewable energy, transmission distribution related projects, even data centers. They're seeing the skill set of electrical engineering being particularly short. So it is a skilled migration topic. Another part of the conversation that we had, Merinda was able to highlight as well, being the HRBP of an organization that has regional projects, was the employee value proposition to getting those people out on sites, making the camps attractive, getting those people out on rosters that were interesting to them, finding the right people that are interested in going out to those sites to be there for extended periods of time, because the renewable energy assets are all being delivered 3 hours outside of major metropolitan cities. And as a function of that, you have to have people who are flexible, but you have to create the conditions for that flexibility to be attractive. Maybe Scarlett's different from the consulting perspective as well, from Turner and Townsend's angle.
Yeah, and I think from the contract side as well, what we're seeing quite a lot, and probably why we're so busy at the moment and have been for the last 18 months, is we're seeing more businesses being open to using contractors, and it actually become part of their strategic hiring plans, where before people never wanted to bring on contractors because it was always expensive. Now we're actually seeing more businesses using short-term contractors for ramping up periods. During this time, they can develop permanent staff and make sure that those initially working in their oil and gas teams are being trained on how to work within the more critical environments. It's just a great thing for us as a business, of course. We love contractors, but also is actually a really good option for clients at this stage when it is hard to get people and it is hard to keep people committed. We're seeing a lot of more businesses do that, especially from the conversation with Andy. It was one of their top tips too.
Not that I know anything about contract, but it sounds like it's a win-win for everybody, because even from a candidate perspective, those candidates get to upskill themselves in different market, as well as the client having a more try before you approach with candidates that they're transitioning into that space. I've never hired for contract, but at least that seems like a good solution for everybody. I think from a perm perspective for us, and what Lindsay and I spoke about, was making sure that the candidate experience was enjoyable. Like, if we're talking more so around how do you address that skills gap, it was more so our conversation around how do you attract that talent and maintain engagement from that talent clients are becoming more picky on what they're hiring for. So the interview processes are getting a little bit more lengthy. How do we keep that candidate engagement and almost challenge those candidates in an enjoyable way that they're able to show off their skills in an interview process, as well as everybody feeling like they're interviewing enough people and making it a challenging and enjoyable experience for those top tier talent.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And I think it's about making sure that we're attracting them at the interview stage, at the hiring stage. But then when they are hired, making sure we're really investing values, inclusivity, and psychological safety come up a lot in the conversation with Andy and I. He spoke about, John, you mentioned earlier about Turner Townsend values. Their values were love a challenge, stronger together, and bringing out the best of people. And he was saying we now need to make sure it's important we're retaining our staff and retaining those people, because the market is so competitive. And otherwise, it's going to be a constant loop of hiring contractors, offboarding contractors, bringing in permanent people. And that's not what we need when the market's so competitive.
Scarlett, was there any particular interest on that topic? Was there anything in particular interest when it came to that retention piece, when it came to the retention of those staff? Because we see that a lot in the Australian market. While EVP is a large part of it, what we do find is that the biggest retention factor, something that I've found in my experience, is progression of salary and progression of career development. Is it something that Turner & Townsend touched on at all from a perspective of ensuring that retention of contract staff when the nature of it is, or maybe some insights potentially from your experience, how does one retain a contractor over an extended period of time in a skills short market? Is there a particular cultural piece? Is there some key variable besides increasing the remuneration?
I think the biggest thing from a permanent basis and on a contract basis, other than the commercial aspect of increasing salaries, is making sure that you keep people engaged and inspired, either company that they're inspired by or by the projects they're working on. If that means blend the sectors they're working in to transition them for a year onto a different project to keep them engaged, let's do that, as long as we keep them within the business and play to people's strengths. We could say that Spencer Ogden's done that, right? When we look at the different streams we've opened up, we give people the opportunity to go from a business manager managing a team of 15 individuals to stepping into a business development role, solely client facing and no people management involved. As times have changed, we've had to become more flexible. So we retain our staff on a contract basis and on a permanent basis as well.
Absolutely. Maybe the key drivers are exactly the same when it comes to position, regardless of the employment of the individual and how the workforce is structured. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. If we speak to somebody that works in a contract market where the average contract length is around 3 to 6 months, that might be different. I don't have any experience in that model. The contractors we work with are on 12, 24, 36-month contracts. So ultimately, when they start, they're going to be with that business for a long time. And they do have that flexibility to move around. If it was a commissioning manager going in for 3 months of commissioning, it might be different.
Very interesting. It's very similar. If you've got a contractor sitting in a particular role for between 12 and 36 months, and if you've got a permanent full-time member who'll sit there for anywhere between 1 and 5, 10 years, the drivers around giving them development and opportunities to work across projects or keeping them engaged for the period that they're there are quite similar. I might ask a question on that topic then. In terms of the skills we've talked about with each of our panelists or guests on each of our individual podcasts, did we see any similarities from a skills perspective? Scarlett, I'm interested to understand from your perspective the skills that you guys talked about, or if there was a particular skill in the domain of Turner & Townsend across their service offering. Maybe it was project controls that they find as planners or costies. Was there a particular skill set that they found high demand across Europe?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head with the PMO office and the project controls and planners. For them, the most in-demand needs are across project and program delivery. Project management, cost, commercial, project controls is still in top demand for them. I think we'll be moving forward. We're seeing that across the whole of Europe as well for those specific skill sets. If we niche that down a little bit, which probably the biggest challenge of those positions with an electrical background, like an MEP, quantity surveyor, or a project controls lead with electrical background.
That's really interesting. Ella, you mentioned before that you're a perm recruiter and Scarlett's a contract recruiter. I've done a little bit of both, even though I'm predominantly and only perm now, reporting into our permanent capability in Singapore. Ella, in your experience or in your discussion with your guest, Did you find that there was a particular skill set beyond the attraction of candidates? Did you see any similarities in the feedback from what Scarlett just mentioned about having particular disciplines being the skills shortage?
We didn't talk about it on the podcast that I hosted. We spoke a lot more generally, but I can talk regionally and what I'm seeing trend-wise across different clients. I think it's a little different than maybe what you're seeing in Europe and EMEA. Scarlett, the changes with the IRA that have happened in the US have meant that there's less tax incentives attached to renewable energy projects now, but that isn't kicking into place until a certain amount of time. So every IPP developer that we're working with at the moment are on a time period to now get their projects constructed so that they can still claim those tax benefits. So we're seeing a lot of push in hiring for anything transmission and distribution, anything that connects projects to the grid, and anything construction related, getting folks out onto site to get the projects built. A couple of years ago, it was very origination and development focused, but those projects are now at a point where they need to be constructed. And now these IPPs and developers have time limits attached to it. Everybody's almost scrambling for the same talent in the market to try and get these projects up and running.
That's really interesting. So essentially, from your perspective then, Ella, you're looking at it, it's the macro factors that are determining where the projects are at, how quickly they're pushing projects along. Whereas Scarlett's then saying from her perspective and the markets that Scarlett's playing in and obviously in support of organizations like Turner and Townsend, it is a skills and discipline specific shortage rather than trying to adapt to a changing regulatory environment. It is very much, have we got people that have done an electrical scope of works? Has this particular planner, regardless of whether it's coming from another industry, have they touched mechanical scope? Have they touched piping besides electrical? Ella, what I wanted to ask you is, do you find that demand more comes through to the contract team, or do you see in your position managing permanent capability, is that also applicable to the permanent team? Are roles being hired permanent full-time rather than just contract for this macro need that might fizzle out over a certain year period?
And that's a really good question. It's a little bit of both. It depends how quickly they need to be mobilized. Like Scarlett mentioned before, companies are now adding this into their strategy around, do we hire contractors or do we hire permanent staff, or can we do a little bit of both? I'd say the more senior management positions, so anything project manager, construction manager on site, are all still hired on a permanent basis because the projects take a few years to construct, and they're the people that you need to have good company buy-in, people that can represent the business well. The rest, you can still find those people on a contract basis. If everyone's scrambling for the same talent, then it's a little bit of both. On the transmission and distribution sides, it's a little bit of both.
That's very
And
interesting.
Ella, you've worked in the London office before in a European market. I believe that the notice periods in the US for a permanent employee are only 2 weeks, right? So the speed to hire permanent in the US is probably the same as hiring a contractor in Europe.
Yeah.
That's very different. In Australia, it's 4 weeks. And I know that Europe is obviously, when we get a European candidate who potentially might be seconded into their Australian business, hypothetically, that individual will be sitting on a 3-month notice period.
So for Europe, for permanent, it's either end of month plus 1 month or the full 3 months. For us to do a perm placement from contract signature to starting, it could be about 3 months on average.
Scarlett, was there, in your guest, from Turner and Townsend perspective, do they advocate heavily for contractors across their European projects, or are they moving in terms of their distribution? We're talking about now the North American business seeing an integrated workforce of both permanent and contract solutions being implemented in the same teams. Did Turner and Townsend offer any insight on which they prefer, or is it very much a case of we'll get the best person, and almost with Australia, where we'll get the best person and we'll work around their requirements if it's not an approved permanent role? What do you see in that respect?
Turner and Townsend's ideal situation would be to hire people permanently. They want to build and grow with a permanent team, especially because a lot of their partners, their clients that they're working with, they're long-standing partnerships. They're not for 1 month. They're not for 3 months. They're not for a year. They're for the next 5 to 10 years. and they want their staff to be able to really build a relationship with their customers and with their clients. But like I mentioned earlier, that's not always possible. They are being awarded a lot of projects quickly, and therefore they need to ramp up. So the work that we do with them in the Nordic region, staff as contract positions with the vision to bring people on a permanent basis after that 12-month period.
That's interesting.
So we're seeing that happen a lot in the Nordics, especially within the data center space, because they need people now, but they want them for the next 5 years, next 10 years. So they do end up converting them to permanent employees.
And going back to your original point on psychological safety, does incentivizing them in that 12-month window where they're sitting there as a contractor with no effective commitment beyond the year period that they're working on the project or with that particular organization, how do you see these organizations attracting that to go and say, well, I'm going to join this organization full-time permanent now as a staff member of the company rather than a contractor? Is that consistent with creating that psychological safety and keeping them interested from a project's perspective over a long year period? Is that something that you see within your clients and maybe potentially something that you saw with your guest?
Yeah, and I think the reason being as well, what I spoke about earlier, the long-term contracts, because they are bringing these people on long-term and they are putting them in client-facing positions, they need them to feel psychological safe because they want them to stay with them, even if it's just for the 12-month duration. So I would say that 9 out of 10 of the customers that I work with, not just Turner and Townsend, value their contractors as permanent employees. I've spoken to contractors before where permanent staff might go for a coffee and not invite the contractors. In my experience, I've never had that feedback from any of the customers that I've worked with, how they know they really need to look after these people and retain them with the hope that eventually they will join them as a staff member. Or come back and work for them. They might leave for 6 months or 2 years and go back and work for them because of the great experience they had.
That's really interesting. And are you seeing, Scarlett, that geographic mobility, is that something that you've potentially seen with clients similar to Turner and Townsend in that respect, where creating geographic mobility to move them across projects is something that they incentivize? Incentivizing somebody to go from a data center project in Finland to another one in Stockholm, for argument's sake, is that something that we see often in these organizations?
Yeah, we see it a lot. I think in the contractors world, that would be an ideal situation, right? They could just remobilize their project teams toward different projects where the demand is, especially if it is with the same end user, but just in different locations. The problem that face is not all candidates are open to doing that. People have families, people have got very used to remote working. And we actually spoke a lot as well, which I don't know if you guys spoke about, is flexible working is great. Working from home is great. But a lot of projects are missing new people from potentially coming out of university, coming on these graduate programs. What people are really lacking now is meeting with people face-to-face in site offices. All of these things that before, even if you was a planner, you had to be on site. So you was doing that site walk at 8 a.m. Now people think, I can do this on Teams. I can check in with the subcontractors at 12 o'clock after lunch.
Absolutely, I am. And I'm sorry, I get excited. That was exactly what the guys were talking about. They were looking at it and going, we don't have enough people who understand what's happening on site. Everybody wants to sit in a metropolitan city, have their 3 days from a hybrid or 2 days in the office and then 3 days hanging out at home. What we're finding is a lot of the early career talent, whether it's a project engineer or, an assistant project manager, for argument's sake, spending 6 to 12 months out on a project site, watching the thing go from different stages of development, even longer if they need to be out there, but from different stages of the construction life cycle even, and understanding the various components. That's actually one of the key skills that people are interviewing for, in my perspective. Mm-hmm. Even to the extent I'm having these conversations with candidates on a regular basis. It's interesting to see the parallels after the conversation that I had with Merinda, Manjeet, and Adam, where we were speaking to candidates about this period in their lives. They might not have kids. They've got a partner who's willing to relocate with them. And I encourage them, take the opportunity now to get an awareness of what's happening on this battery or solar project physically there, so that you can spend a few years. And then when you're interviewing for a project manager role that requires you to be out on site 1 week of the month, at least you've had significant exposure to see what's happening on a day-to-day basis. You don't necessarily need to be a construction manager, but you need to have constructability. And I think that is exactly the same when it comes to plan. Maybe having that exposure to see what's actually happening really
For us, it's a little bit different, especially from the types of positions that me and my team have been used to hiring for. A lot of them are office-based roles.
Okay.
Every business that we're recruiting for has now hubbed out their locations. We're living with a candidate pool now that all got used to working in COVID and all moved to their most desirable location. And every business now, maybe they have an office in Chicago, New York, DC, but the next client has an office in Portland, California, Denver, and they're all trying to hire the same talent pool. And then you get a client come to you for a remote hire. The difference in the ability to being able to send a short list of candidates for a remote position versus anything else is so difficult now versus pre-COVID because nobody wants to move. So you have to find that talent pool of people in that location.
Completely agree.
Do you think, Ella, a final follow-up, do you think that companies and our clients in general, let's say in North America, do you think that we need to necessarily consult in to our clients to tell them, look, the amount of effort and time taken to get candidates who are prepared to relocate versus the relocation packages that you are offering, the incentives that you're offering to bring these people into these hubs to build that culture? Are the clients receptive to that? Are they coming up with their own innovative case-by-case strategies to attract a candidate who's been living in Utah for 4 years and wants to necessarily move to the hub that exists in Colorado, for argument's sake?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's also our job. I'm a big advocate for our service costs. So if they want to start talent pooling people across all of North America for a remote location, it's our job to go away and attract that talent pool and sell the opportunity correctly to the candidates in the market. And then it's also our job to come back and say, we've spoken to X amount of people. Here's your pool of people who are interested. If you were open to doing it remotely, here's your pool of people that would look at it remotely. But I think we get there over a period of time. And it is the clients who are ready to move quickly when that shift happens and ready to be flexible for somebody who maybe has family commitments and can come in 2 days a week versus 3. And it's also making sure that they're being fair to their employees that are in the office 3 days a week too. So there's a lot of moving parts, but there's definitely flexibility, but we have to get there once we've been talent pooling along the way.
Yeah. And are they receptive? We show them in North America? Is that something that they're very...
Yeah. And I think it's up to us to show that work too, rather than it being 2 weeks, a month period and say, hang on, we can't do it. It's actually, we've spoken to this many people and coming with the data to the clients and acting in a consultative way to say, you know, they can't see the work we're doing behind the scenes unless we show that too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really showed as well with kind of what you and your team are doing really well is coming to your clients or partners with solutions and not problems, right? That's probably where we're standing out in the market as a business, is that our clients are not just our clients, they're our partners that are long-standing relationships that we want to continue to grow. We've been speaking for quite a while, so let's potentially have a little bit of a final question for a wrap-up. To both of you, was there anything your guest said that changed your perspective on talent in the energy transition that potentially you hadn't heard of before, or potentially a different opinion to what you might have had before the conversation?
I suppose what was really interesting, my conversation with Lindsay, was how much emphasis they have on their internship program. We were talking about attracting the 3 to 5 year talent pool. And obviously from a recruitment standpoint, we're like, that group of people is tricky to find and tricky to engage with. And even from her perspective was, well, we put a huge emphasis on our internship program. We come to you when we can't find those people, but in an ideal situation, we hire those people from college and they stay with us until they've got that 5 years experience. Even 10, that's something I hadn't ever thought of. It's something we don't recruit for. And I thought it was a really interesting way for them to keep longevity and retention in the company too.
We're seeing more and more businesses do that over here with new and emerging markets. We're seeing more businesses go down that kind of internship and grad hiring. What was interesting from Andy is that despite the end users' preference to be hiring people with a certain amount of years of experience, what they really are trying to focus on at the moment is that attitude and values that the people are bringing into the interviews and bringing into the business. And actually, eventually, it's going to outweigh the sector experience because they need people to be flexible and agile. This isn't going to be the last time that they need people to have certain experience. So they need people to adapt and grow with them.
I love that.
I think having my time to deliberate on what my key insight was, because honestly, the three that I had could have each been an individual podcast. I was expecting to come out of the podcast with my guests having had the solution already, or coming up with the solution after an hour conversation. We didn't exactly get to invent a new solution to the talent strategy that fit everyone because, and I think this is my key takeaway, the attraction piece, the EVP piece, and the interest of candidates joining a particular organization is very case by case. And I think if you don't have a deliberate employee value proposition to get people out to projects, to get them interested, to keep them engaged so you can build a team that is going to move across projects with you, that's where teams struggle. From my perspective, that was my key insight. The three people I had on the podcast were all very passionate about building teams that care about what they're doing and building teams they can see succession in and create, the next milestone for the individual's career. They feel like, hey, this is a particularly deliberate manager that I'm working with, and that's why I'm going to move from this battery project that's 500 kilometers away to another battery hybrid project that's bigger afterwards. That was my favorite insight. Besides that, definitely the piece, it wasn't necessarily a particular discipline in Australia that was painful for all of these people. It was an attitude and it was a general experience thing, which is something that I think we can definitely address constructively if we've got deliberate managers like the three that I was lucky to have on our podcast.
Amazing.
Great. Thank you, guys.
It's been lovely to hang out with you both. It's been so nice to catch up with you both and hear your thoughts and listen to both of your podcasts, but to get your insight as well. We managed to cover the globe today. It's been great.
Thank you so much. Well, Ella, have a great day. John, get some sleep.
Yes.
And I'm going to go finish my afternoon. So see you later, guys. Thank you.
Take care, guys. My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Soapbox. If you've got thoughts or questions about today's episode, reach out to us via our website, spencer-ogden.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow Spencer Ogden on LinkedIn for updates, insights, and behind-the-scenes content. Founded in 2010, Spencer Ogden is a global recruitment leader in sustainability, natural resources, and infrastructure. With 12 offices worldwide and over 380 specialists, we connect top talent across the full energy value chain, from finance to design to operations. Powered by our purpose of creating careers to power a sustainable future, we've spent 15 years building deep partnerships with clients and candidates to help drive the energy transition forward. We'll see you next time on Soapbox.